That's better. Okay, so hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today I'll be talking about some of the authors that have been on my radar. I'm not talking here about like an extensive list of all the authors that are somewhat intriguing to me that I want to get a handle of. No, these are really the top authors that have been on my radar for years, or that have really risen to the top of my radar in the past year. And so hopefully I might be able to get around to some of their works in 2020. Don't make any promises, I don't make any like obligations to myself to do this in 2020, but I would be super happy to get around to their work, so hopefully I'll find some time in 2020 to get around to them. First one of these is the oldest name on the book, and oldest name on the list, and that is Anne Bronte's Tenant of Wildfell Hall in particular. So I've read Jane Eyre. I really love Jane Eyre by her sister Charlotte Bronte. I've been intrigued by the story of the Brontes ever since I learned more about them when I was a English major. I always say English major, but the system doesn't work like that in Belgium. But okay, so ever since I studied English literature, but like the publicity for the Brontes is always focused on Emily and on Charlotte, and so I never really had any interest in Anne Bronte that much. I tried to read Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, definitely like gave it like 3 goes, and I still haven't gotten around to finishing it. I think I always stop like somewhere after 2 chapters because I don't know, it just seems to be somewhat of a struggle for me. Hey Buffy. But I definitely want to give Anne Bronte's Tenant of Wildfell Hall a go, because I've been seeing a lot of videos recently about people reading this book and absolutely loving it, and it sounds very intriguing when they explain it in their videos. And so I definitely want to give this one a go. I think it might be more up my alley than Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte is, and so I'm intrigued by this one, want to give it a go, and it's definitely time for another Bronte, because I've been intrigued by them ever since I first read Jane Eyre, but I still haven't read any other Bronte than Jane Eyre, so that's really a shame, and I really want to address that issue at some point. So Tenant of Wildfell Hall, it's definitely on my radar there. In terms of what the book is about, as far as I remember from all of those talks that I read, from all of those videos that I saw that got me intrigued, it's very much a sort of like feminist book avant la lettre. It's of course not going to be as feminist as a book of our times, because feminism in those times had a whole different reality to face, but it's very much about a woman standing alone and on her own 2 feet in Victorian England. So next up is an author that I will definitely be getting around to, or should be getting around to, because this is part of a challenge that I set myself for my reading in 2020. So I've referred to it in a couple of videos that I already posted this month, but in 2020 I definitely want to give fantasy a priority, and I actually have a list of a certain number of fantasy books that I want to be getting around to in 2020, and one of these is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. Now N.K. Jemisin is very much an up-and-coming fantasy writer. She's been bursting onto the scene in the last 5 years, let's say. And a big part of that is this trilogy, the Broken Earth trilogy, because every single book in this trilogy, I think it's every single book, at least the first 2, have won the Hugo Award for Best Fantasy, because every single book in this trilogy, or I believe it is every single book, it's definitely the first 2, has won the Hugo Award. So that kind of drew the general public's attention to her work. A lot of people who love reading fantasy have been exploring her work, have absolutely enjoyed the Broken Earth trilogy. I've heard some mixed things about her other trilogy, the Inheritance trilogy, and she is starting a new trilogy in 2020, which is called The City, I think. The first book is The City We Became, and that also sounds very intriguing. But so I want to get a go on The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin and see if this is another great author for me to explore. I love fantasy, and I want to be rediscovering my love for fantasy in 2020, so a new author might be just the way to go for that. Next up is an author whose work I don't own a physical copy, and that is Frederick Bachman. So Frederick Bachman is also one of these people who burst onto the scene a couple of years ago, and most particularly with his book A Man Called Ove. I think it was mainly the movie adaptation that triggered this sort of widespread hype around him, because I think he's Norwegian. He's definitely a Scandinavian author. I think it's Norwegian, but I'm not entirely sure about that. And when the adaptation came out, his book also started getting widespread attention, and a lot of people were reading it and really loving it. But that's not the only book by him that has become popular. So he also has a very popular book, Beartown, which is all about rape culture. But so I've been seeing a lot, he's been very well read on BookTube in the last few years, and a lot of people have really been enjoying all of his works, or at least the majority of the books that I've been reading, and I also want to see where I stand with his works. Next up is an author that lately I've been seeing referred to a lot. It's of course to do with the fact that she has a book coming out in 2020, but a lot of people are referring to her as like a very important author for our times, as in like they're saying like she's one of the greatest authors of our times at the moment. This is very much coming from a UK perspective because the books are also very much tied in with UK history, but still I really love the UK. London is like my favorite place to visit, and since I studied English literature I'm obviously somewhat drawn to places like the UK and like the USA. So for me, I don't think that that's going to be a problem, that that's somewhat of a UK centric statement to make. But the author I'm talking about is Hilary Mantel and her book Wolf Hall. So Wolf Hall actually won the Golden Booker Prize, and that's the moment that this book started to draw my attention, because I must say that before that I wasn't all that interested. So this is a historical fiction work. It is the first in a trilogy, of which the third one is coming out in 2020, and it is centered on the life of Thomas Cromwell, so it's very much a political historical fiction, which is definitely not really up my alley. I like historical fiction fine, but it's just not one of my favorite genres, and so I wasn't very intrigued up until now. But when it won the Golden Booker Prize, this of course changed, because that kind of implies that it's more than just your average historical fiction, that it's one of the best books in the historical fiction genre, and so I definitely want to give it a go and see what my thoughts are on this. It's a big chunk, so we'll see whether I fit it in 2020, but yeah, I'm intrigued and want to see whether I want to continue with the series or not. And then we get to another author of which I also don't own a physical copy of her work, and that is Sally Rooney. So her career has really taken off in the last 2 years. In 2018 she published her latest work, which is Normal People. It was published in the UK in 2018 and landed on the long list for the Booker Prize, I think. A lot of people were loving it, a lot of people praised it. It ended up on the Waterstones list. I think it became the best book of 2018 on the Waterstone list. I'm not entirely sure of that, but it's definitely heavily recommended by them as well. And then in 2019 it was published in the US, and it has since landed on the Goodreads Choice Award list, for example. So it is clearly making its rounds. It's very popular and people seem to absolutely love it. I also want to join in on the actions. She also has another book, I think it's called Conversations with Friends, which was apparently also a very good book. So definitely want to see what all the fuss is about, but I will be trying to go in with zero expectations, because I must say that a lot of people who read it like after the hype were kind of like, I don't understand the hype, I don't see why it's so much better or anything like other books. So I will be going in with zero expectations, hopefully, or at least I will be trying to go in with zero expectations. And then the final book on the list, might be shocked that I haven't read anything by this author, but that is Gillian Flynn. The book in particular that I have is Dark Places. I was gifted this by a friend, so we do a sort of like book exchange every year for our birthdays, but basically it's just like one time that we come together and we exchange it for everybody's birthdays. The majority of them are in July, so it's still fine. But and then we just buy books for a fixed amount, and so one of these that I got was Dark Places by Gillian Flynn. I have seen the movie, I've also seen Gone Girl obviously, and I love both movies, so there's hope for me for loving this book as well, because I must say that thriller or mystery or anything like that, detective, all of these aren't necessarily my thing, which isn't to say that I can't enjoy them, it's just that my enjoyment of these genres is more limited. I think there's a lot of more things that I don't like in this genre, so that a lot of the books in these genres will not work for me, but sometimes it does work, and then I really enjoy them a lot. So because I saw the movies and I really loved them, I hope that I will also be able to enjoy the book. Especially for Dark Places, I don't really remember the plot of the movie all that well. I remember that it had to do with a sort of like dark family history, but so hopefully that means that I can go into this without like having the huge twist or whatever like already on my mind, because at this point at least I have no idea what the book is going to be about. But so yeah, this is a dark book, a dark thriller, so looking forward to it as well. And so that is it for the authors that I want to explore in 2020. There are definitely a lot more authors that are somewhere on my radar, but these are really the ones that at the moment are really at the top of my radar that I really want to be getting around to. So hopefully 2020 is the time for me to do that. But we will see. Hopefully you will see these books popping up in my 2020 reading year. But yeah, see you guys for the next one. Bye.